Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week with 4 brand new movies and 4 brand new reviews that are all playing in theaters right now. This week on the show, Fame makes monkeys of all of us in Better Man. Sex, power, seduction, masturbation.
Oh my.
And Nicole Kidman being fed treats in Babygirl. When the world is in chaos, you start over, but how do you start over amongst chaos in Homestead? And finally, he defied everyone to change everything in A Complete Uknown. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch a roar and a burst of flame.
The Movie Wire podcast. There it is.
You need people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
A high-powered CEO puts her career and family on the line when she begins a torrid affair with her much younger intern. Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson star in Babygirl.
Hey, we need to have a conversation. You're very young. I don't want to hurt you.
I think I have power over you. Because I could make one call and you lose everything. Does that turn you on when I say that?
Don't you have to be at work?
Is now a good time to introduce the interns?
Yeah.
I chose you as my mentor.
I'm not a part of that program.
Oh, no, you are. You're on the list. I got an email and I clicked on your name.
How'd you get that dog to calm down?
Good girl. Yeah, I gave it a cookie.
You always have cookies on you.
Why do you want one?
Being a CEO means being a nurturer and a collaborator.
Guns.
No. What?
Is that what you want?
I have these fantasies.
What do you mean? It's about giving and taking power.
What did you do? Go to a library? Look that up?
This is what I'm talking
No,
about.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No.
Say it.
Okay.
I won't do.
I will do.
Whatever you tell me. Say it again.
I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
Good girl.
I've never experienced anything like this.
You're my baby girl.
Written and directed by Helena Rain, director of Bodies, 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 attempts to give us a vision of sexual frustration, sexual freedom, sexual empowerment, sexual vulnerabilities, and of course, just good old-fashioned sex. The movie in itself, other than the attempted acts of sexual seduction, really doesn't last in interest for the entire runtime. Within the first 10 minutes of the film, it reveals itself on what the movie's intent is and what our main character, Romy, played by Nicole Kidman, needs and what her wants are. And from the first 10-15 minutes, already spoon feeds the audience of what her internal struggle is. When telling a story about power and sexual nature utilizing an attempt at a sexy tone of seduction, there has to be a little mystery to not only our characters, but the tone of which how this story is told. But instead here, we are told in the form of a romance novel where writer-director Helena Rain, we can tell, wants a more powerful tale of seduction, but leans more on the PG-13 version of 50 Shades of Grey. The focus of sexual acts versus an attempt at messaging is outweighed by the acts we are seeing on screen. It merely just throws in simplistic definitions by sexual positions to execute the vision of messaging, or a power of dominance that leads to sexual freedom. Babygirl follows Romy, a middle-aged powerful CEO and wife to Jacob, played by Antonio Banderas, and also Romy is a mother who seems to be in a complacent marriage, but even more so a sexually frustrated one, along with a job of power, but a power that she questions. As we get examples by Rain by Kidman reading as a CEO of teleprompter or cue cards to show that she is not in control, with an assistant that plans Kidman's every move, and at times Kidman doesn't even remember or know the plans that were made. We get a lot of examples of how Kidman isn't in control. They're simplistic, it's stuff we've seen before. It's right in your face examples, or excuses, I should say, for the actions that we see on screen. And I'm not going to disbowel this because there are situations or fantasies, if you will, of people that get complacent. They have the fantasy of cheating or what have you. I'm not going to dive into that topic, but I am going to dive into the topic of how this movie represented. And this is a stale attempt at a fantasy. This is a stale attempt at justifying the actions. And again, the movie does try and justify itself, and it does try and make nice on a neutral aspect, but that is the main problem of this movie. It doesn't pick a side. It tries to say neutral. So when it comes to the actions, we don't have an opinion on what these characters do. But even as we talk about our main character, our Romy character, how the movie portrays her is this idea of a powerful, strong woman CEO, but on the inner surface, she's not. And as we get these examples from the cue cards to the assistant to everything almost doing for her, this character is written so stale, so straightforward, it's almost like a cleverly placed AI robot that her own company sells. Now, of course, when it comes to a movie of seduction, what would be a movie without seduction than the attractive male that comes into her life? And Romy's life changes when she meets a new intern, Samuel, played by Harris Dickinson, whose character is almost a robot himself, but not intentional. The written character and performance of Samuel, just like Kidman's character, adds nothing of mystery or interest to the progression of the story, other than just waiting for him to be alone in a scene with Kidman, knowing that scene is going to lead to Kidman taking her clothes off. And open and honest, even at first, there is an appeal to Nicole Kidman taking her clothes off, but the curiosity of what's going to happen soon vanishes. When we get the same routine of the two meeting, it's the same formula that happens over and over again. It gets exhausting, with the exception of Nicole Kidman taking off her clothes. But anyway, the movie goes again through these routines. Samuel gives a confident pickup line to the boss. They meet. Kidman gets naked. Samuel gives her the same line of his empowerment and insert a new sexual position. As the movie goes on, we see the same damn routine. I think I felt the same way Nicole Kidman did in the beginning of the movie. Unsatisfied and bored. I feel your pain, Kidman. My cinematic experience led to no real climax. Movie climax, the end of the movie. That's what they call the end of the movie. A movie climax, not my own personal climax. Wrong word choice. Anyway, by the end of the film, I should say, I was left with really nothing of substance to really make an impact of what I just viewed, but rather the feeling of an agreed upon one night stand. I agreed to see this movie. Maybe if it's good, we can do it again. But after the experience, it's me that will be ghosting this movie. Now, the shining light here is Kidman's performance. She does does have a certain layer to her portrayal, but the problem is that the written material doesn't do anything to support a good performance. The lines are brief and subtle and doesn't convince me that she is a powerful CEO or at times a good communicator. The character is written with the same level of substance as the interns that appear in the film. There's really no depth to her, and when it comes to the scenes of a sexual encounter, I didn't get the buy-in of a thrilling, daring, eye-opening revolution of what Kidman really needed. Her character isn't balanced enough. Instead of teetering to complacent and unhappy, to giving hints of wanting more outside of sexual hints, the written character is written so straightforward and stale, it doesn't add to anything other than an arrow that points to our Romy character just wanting to have sex with somebody other than her husband. That is supported by the brief encounters with Samuel before the first exchange happens, and even here feels like a watered-down romance novel or the intro to a softcore porn video. Our characters wander the screen, banking on the tone and style to carry the sexiness, but each of our characters are completely one-dimensional. There's not one character I was bought into or believed, especially from our Samuel character, that from his first introduction on screen with Kidman, might as well just whipped his dick out from his first interaction to really show us his true intent, because that's what it felt like. There was no build, there was no mystery, there was no chemistry between Kidman and Harrison in the beginning to build this, even though the intimate moments at times can be believable and engaging to watch. But the real problem is with this movie is that it becomes so repetitive, it doesn't go outside of the formula on what leads up to these two and later what happens during their encounters. We know it's not going to end good for these characters. We know that high stakes and affair is not going to end well, and the movie doesn't care to ensure that we are questioning its intent. There's a difference on a movie knowing what it is and attempting to put in messaging to show it's more than just a movie about sex. But the messaging is put on the sidelines to just be formula. It would have been so easy to add more symbolism, more substance to these characters to make these sexual encounters mean something. We have encounters, high stakes, and an appearance at the family's residence, blackmail, and of course sex, but even that feels too safe. There's no high stakes to the entire movie. There's no caring to it. Babygirl is just a movie that exchanges gender roles from a watered-down 50 Shades of Grey-inspired story with characters taken out of a 90s softcore porn film. This isn't anything new that we've seen in the past from mixing seduction with power with high stakes. The difference here is that we have seen this before, and we know what's coming. There are some that will like to love this movie because of the performances, and it's not about the performances. That's not the problem. I enjoyed the performances. It's how the written dialogue treats these performances and teases at something much greater for our talent, which goes to show that performances can somewhat save a movie. And here, it somewhat does. Nicole Kidman still has it, and I have to give her credit in more ways than just dialogue. I'm giving a sitting but standing ovation to Nicole Kidman, but I'm giving Babygirl 2.5 stars. The meteoric rise, dramatic fall, and remarkable resurgence of British pop superstar Robbie Williams in Better Man.
I'm Robbie Williams. I'm one of the biggest pop stars in the world. This is my story, but I'm not going to tell it in an ordinary way because I don't see myself how others see me.
For the next 2 hours, your ass is mine!
To be honest, I've always been a little less evolved. I don't wanna rock, so let's take it from the top, shall we?
I sit and wait.
My dad was well enamored by the stars of the day.
You can't learn it. You're either born with it or you're a nobody.
There's an angel.
Don't want to be a nobody.
Contemplate my fate.
You're enough.
The places where we go when we're grey and old.
You got in? You're in that band?
Take that! I'll do this fucking baby!
Shut up, you tits!
Oh, fuck off, Glenn!
Mother!
Look around the table. In 5 years, we're all going to hate each other. But we'll be rich.
Do I look like a pop star to you?
I wouldn't change a hair on your head.
And through it, she offers me protection.
I want to prove I can make it on my own.
Proof to who?
Everyone.
And down the waterfall, wherever it may take me.
Songs are only valuable if they cost you something.
If you're gonna laugh, do it on the inside, yeah?
And know that life won't break me.
I don't give a fuck what they think.
You give a fuck what everyone thinks.
Remember, I believe in you.
Through it
So, the story starts.
I'm loving angels instead.
Wow, okay, here we go. Now, 2024 started with a 0-star review, and 2025 I have hope for because here we go. Now, music biopics have always seemed to follow the same formula. Innocence to the taste of fame, to the crescendo to the dark side of fame with drugs and alcohol, to love interest, to eventually a climax ending in tragedy or the loss of fame. At some point, audiences have asked or are going to want something a little bit different. But filmmakers and writers have shown difficulty in telling a music biopic any differently, with the exception of the experimental Lego Pharrell Williams film Piece by Piece, that gets marks for trying something different, but didn't really do anything with the Lego idea to make it truly feel different, and is steered more back to the original formula. It just looked different. Better Man isn't so much different from the formula, but does try to do something a little bit different, and at first appearance is a little bit laughable, but rather makes our artist Robbie Williams appear in the form of a chimpanzee that's voiced by Jono Davies during the entire runtime of the film. The intent of the look of the monkey from interviews with Robbie Williams is the intent that his entire career he felt himself a performing monkey, and just a little less evolved. The symbolic nature, the presence, and the idea of why a monkey is and can be simplistic enough where we can put the symbolic pieces together without scratching our heads the entire movie. And even though Better Man follows just about the same formula of music biopics past, director Michael Gracie, director of The Greatest Showman, as if he's channeling his inner Bob Fosse. A lot of the technique and ideas feel inspired from 1979's All That Jazz, with our main character taking control of a vulnerable look told through the eyes of our main character, taking us on a journey of obsession, fame, and driven to madness. Gracie's Through the Eyes of Williams takes us through the eyes of darkness of Williams' fears and doesn't get tempted by having surrounding characters give us situations or dialogue to tell us what he is feeling. From Robbie Williams looking into the crowd from the stage to see images of other chimps or dark figures that symbolizes fear, to a daring battle scene that looks to come straight off of Planet of the Apes. But it's not all about the visuals that support this. The sharp screenplay written by new writer Simon Gleason, Oliver Cole, and our director Michael Gracie, these three, especially for two new writers, create an incredibly sharp and clever script with intent of how Robbie Williams' story should be told. In a clever scene, and one of my favorite scenes, we have Robbie Williams in a recording booth attempting to record a solo song, where he feels he is struggling with how it sounds or if it's offbeat, with the sound engineers in the booth stopping him numerous times. As he is stopped, we are left with Williams' facial expressions, as well as just the soundless reactions from our sound engineers in the booth. Williams is trying to read these engineers, and he's taking their reactions and thinking he is a failure. He's not good enough. But when dialogue is added for the audience to hear, it is quite the opposite. But Williams is left with just what his mind is telling him is that he's not good, which is an added layer to this person, this artist, and his ongoing mental strain, which adds to the sport that Williams doesn't find himself relevant or he's not good enough. This is where Better Man separates itself from most, that just like All That Jazz, we are allowed into the feelings and the mind of Robbie Williams through clever visuals, musical numbers, and dialogue that at times will contradict what Williams is thinking versus what is being said. Now, I wasn't familiar with Robbie Williams or the pop group boy band he once was a part of Take That, and maybe that's why this movie at an entertainment level worked for me. But it's not just about this movie being entertaining, but how did it become entertaining? This is where I think those that are familiar with Robbie Williams will find some grand value, as it feels vulnerable, intimate, and tries to make us understand not just the normal story of fame to drugs to alcohol, but the mental state of what got him there. We hear inner thoughts that are written very clever to paint the picture to relatability, not necessarily of how one handles it, but rather how one feels in times of depression or the worry of relevance. There's some relatability whether you're famous or not on how we feel during times of struggle or times of depression. There will be people that do relate to the mindset of Robbie Williams, or at least how it's presented to the audience. But the one thing that appropriately will separate the audience to kind of separate the relevance from normality of what depression and mental strain can do of feeling relevant to the fame of what causes it is the idea of this monkey, and this monkey being presented on screen as Robbie Williams. The idea of Williams to be trained by a monkey is even more relevant from the very first scene of the movie, where we have Williams as a young boy idolizing his dad and his love for the classics from Sammy Davis Jr. to Frank Sinatra. He sings alongside his dad until one mistake is made by Williams, and Williams is scrutinized, showing the devolved piece of being a monkey at the birth of Williams' need for belonging, to fast forward later in the movie, where the movie really does try and connect the dots to Robbie Williams' mindset from past to present to future, where we have a scene of Robbie's Nana reading and comparing Robbie to the boy of the Sword of the Stone. And Williams gives a brilliant narration where we get the visual of suffocation and we get the visual of how he's feeling, along with this flashback tying into the feelings piece of this flashback of where it all started. It's strategic writing, it's clever writing, it's sharp writing, and it's writing done well. I was taken back on the amount of care that went into this movie, especially by a couple new writers. We can tell just based not on the visuals or the spectacle of what Better Mans tries to do, but how strategic our writers are to try and tie almost a thesis of mental stability and trauma into an added element of fame, and even the dangers of fame. It brings the saying that money can't buy happiness to the forefront and almost unites us as humans, because it's not necessarily just about the money, it's about the relevance of one's living or one's being. From the low, middle to upper class, there is nothing that separates us from feeling or thinking our worth. Now, does Gracie's strategy always work? No, but that's going to be open for opinion. We do see some moments where we could have used some more supporting characters interact with Robbie Williams with some more dialogue, including some scenes with his love interest. But at the same time, this is where I'm torn or just put into an adjustment phase of the formula. Of movies past, we always had the female love interest. The female love interest always being the catalyst for change. And I had to really think to myself, is that what I'm really missing here? Is just that I'm accustomed and adjusted to this? Because what this movie does is have Robbie Williams try and seek out help, but also try and work on himself without somebody forcing him to do it. Did we really need more dialogue in this movie to prove the point? The whole answer holistically is no, because we have a musical number and a scene where he's interacting with a love interest, and then we move on. The movie didn't need to rely on this, because just like a blink of an eye, we realize this isn't a movie just about what happened, but what Williams is thinking during his journey of stardom, during his journey of mental stability. Now, after watching the film, I watched some early reviews with Williams, not knowing a lot about him, and I found him, based on the early reviews, not only dislikable, but hard to relate to. But as the years went on and I watched some later videos, there was a change in the man, almost a subtle realization. And open and honest, I found that kind of sentimental. I found that special because I could feel the movie as Williams changed match the way he did interviews and spoke. And whether you like Williams or not, there is some truth to the evolution and journey of growth that one can appreciate and also take away from to an extent. Better Man is truly an achievement of not necessarily changing the formula, but taking inspirations from films past to not just tell a story about a man and his rise and fall, but rather a story about a man's thought process and mental fall and rise. There are so many rare movies that can make us laugh, cry, smile, cheer, all in a 2-hour runtime. And Better Man is 100% absolutely one of them. And for the experience and the overall care put into this movie, I'm giving Better Man.
We got one!
4 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
Go with the flow in one of the best animated features this year in Flow, which stands on all fours in this hypnotic, beautiful animated journey receiving 4 stars. Everyone deserves a chance to fly in the book to Broadway, Broadway to the big screen adaptation of Wicked, which brought down this house with nobody underneath it receiving 3.5 stars. What We Do in Life echoes in eternity, and Gladiator 2, which felt like an eternity to get through, receiving 2 stars. On New Year's Eve, 1999, the Y2K bug changed the world forever in Y2K, which felt like the movie was more of an inconvenience than what actually happened during Y2K. The greatest story ever told by the worst kids in the history of the world in the greatest Christmas pageant ever, which is the best Christmas present you will get this Christmas, receiving 3.5 stars. Question Everything in Heretic, which challenges the mind with questions and knows that can be scarier than the scariest monster, receiving 3 stars. Till Death Do They Part, witness the epic conclusion in Venom The Last Dance, which made Magic Mike's Last Dance feel like an Italian opera, receiving 1.5 stars. One Man's Down could change everything in Juror Number 2, which in this film's court of law was proven one of the best movies of the year, receiving 3.5 stars. You better not shout and you better not cry, and prepare to be terrified again in Terrifier 3, which nothing says Christmas cheer better than a chainsaw up your ass, receiving 3 stars. Then finally, What Happens Behind These Walls will change everything in Conclave, that really encouraged me to take some popcorn to church to watch the drama fly, receiving 3.5 stars. Make sure you check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow and subscribe, and please don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, before we get into the last set of reviews, there is a podcast that after a short break is now back. And that's with my dear friend Dan over at the Casting Views podcast. Not only do I drop in from time to time, he is also part of my weekly listening routine. And oh, have I missed him so. So let's welcome back Dan over at Casting Views, and let's hear from the Casting Views podcast now.
Fancy taking a humorous trip down a random topic each week? You do? Well, you're in luck. Casting Views, presented by me, Dan, and a host of guests, bring you just that. With topics from the world of entertainment, science, sport, and everyday life, there's bound to be a topic that's going to inform and amuse. Catch Casting Views every Sunday on all listening platforms now.
In 1961, an unknown 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York City with his guitar and forges relationships with music icons on his rise to fame, culminating in a groundbreaking performance that reverberates worldwide in A Complete Unknown.
You tramped all the way from Minnesota. Why is that? I wanted to catch a spark.
If you're traveling in the North Country Fair.
I say no one wants to hear what a kid wrote last month.
Well, I like your songs.
Where the winds hit heavy on the borderline.
Who wrote this? He did.
Remember me.
How about that Joan Baez, folks? Well, she's pretty. Sings pretty. Maybe a little too pretty.
Your songs are like an oil painting at the dentist's office.
You're kind of an asshole, Bob.
If you go with snowflake storm, with the rivers freezing, summer ends.
For anyone who's gonna hold your attention on stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
Yeah, you can be beautiful or you can be ugly, but you can't be plain.
To keep her from the howling winds.
When's the new album out?
Soon. 200 people in that room, and each one wants me to be somebody else. They should just let me be.
Let you be what?
Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
I hear Bob is playing electric.
Not on our stage, he isn't.
They just want me singing Blowing in the Wind for the rest of my goddamn life.
Well, this is gonna piss some people off.
You came here with nothing but a guitar. You never talk about your family, your past.
People make up their past, Sylvie. They remember what they want. They forget the rest.
I want to know which side he's on.
I'm not sure they want to hear what I want to play, Johnny.
I want to hear it.
Turn it down!
Play it loud. Make some noise, BD.
Based on the book by Elijah Wald entitled Dylan Goes Electric, comes another music biopic this week. It's a week of music biopics apparently this week on the Movie Wire, with the showdown between Bob Dylan and Robbie Williams. When it comes to the music, there is no question to me that I will go with Bob Dylan, but I can openly admit that I did kind of like Robbie Williams' Christmas album a little bit more. When it comes to films overall, these are both unique in their own way. You have already heard my review for Better Man. When it comes to its uniqueness, this film at first glance isn't a perfect or even a great film, but it is a well-made and performed biopic. There was a moment or two during the first act that I did give some yawns and check my time. Even though I did enjoy the performances, the pacing seemed to not gain any steam. But I have to say, the moment our Bob Dylan, played by Timothée Chalamet, sings the song "The Times They Are A-Changin' in front of a crowd, this is the moment that the film makes sense and the film works towards. And our filmmakers know this to capture the emotional element of the viewer and know this is the movie's pivotal moment to say that this is not about the man of Bob Dylan, but the messaging of the lyrics he's saying. And also can be said, maybe this is a tale that Bob Dylan would be proud of. This was also an important moment that I realized what this movie was trying to accomplish and how it just works without real explanation on why it works. This picture doesn't follow the normal formula I spoke to in Better Man, but that's not solely because Bob Dylan is that rare case that didn't follow the same formula. At a surface level, may not have looked sexy or enticing to a studio to tell the story of a young folk singer. The reason it works so well is because our writers know to tell the tale of Bob Dylan and add elements of interest. Our talent, our filmmakers, our writers have to make it about the journey. It has to be a journey film and who Bob Dylan meets along the way to grow him through bad career decisions to good decisions. It's a journey of inspiration and evolution of an artist through human experiences. And that's the best way to describe A Complete Unknown. A journey or evolution of a man's artistry through human experiences. Not sex, drugs, and rock and roll, a heightened ego to lead to halt a career, no stereotypical characters to amplify or dramatize Dylan's actions or behaviors, and not a story being told through his entire career, but the foretained moments that add reflection to what would be a turning point in his career. A Complete Unknown was written by our director James Mangold from Walk the Line alongside Jay Cox from 1995's Strange Days and Gangs of New York. These writers were smart on taking just a mere chunk from Dylan's life and include an ensemble of important events that would be relevant to not only Dylan's music by his journey through his inspiration of composition and career. He adds elements of human touch to why he got him there, to why he sang the songs he did. Given the care of the persona of Dylan and the care of the journey, it's not only a respectable written piece of history, but also a sharp and smart one. The movie portrays with Dylan's knowledge that the world is bigger than he is. Our writers bring in an ensemble of characters from Dylan's evolution, and that's what made me compare this to almost a road trip type of movie. But instead of a road, we get Bob Dylan symbolizing the road as the viewer is the journeyman. Now, when it comes to flaws, I've touched on this in some of my previous episodes on some of my pet peeves of mine, is utilizing so many damn close-up shots in films to substitute the emotion of what's happening on screen. And A Complete Unknown utilizes so many damn emotional up-close shots that my eyes almost did a half roll to the back of my head. But by the time we get to a moment towards the third act, we get a close-up on Edward Norton, who plays folk singer Pete Seeger, who in the film discovers Bob Dylan. This close-up shot, along with Norton's brilliant performance, may I add, adds a face of grief, glee, and unpredictability, and it shows an amount of empathy of how he's viewing Dylan. And I realized at this exact moment what James Mangold was trying to do, which is exactly what I loved about this movie's strategy, which is take us on again a journey as our ensemble guides Dylan through this period of time. Mangold overuses these close-up shots appropriately to bring the audience in on the journey of Bob Dylan. I felt like I was on a ride in history, like a true looking glass into Dylan's life, where Dylan had the pleasure of meeting all these people, some famous, some greedy, some loving, some genuinely down to earth. And the viewer is now a looking glass to look at the reactions that Dylan didn't see. All these people that were invited into Dylan's life to see what a performer he was. We had genuine care, we had general grief, we had general fear. There are a lot of emotions coming from these performances and these up-close shots that help guide us on this journey. Now, I just mentioned it, Edward Norton does give a fantastic performance here, but this is a movie that lies heavy on the entire ensemble of good performances, which are all good, but I have to give credit to Timothée Chalamet, still aims to impress me with demonstrating and proving his range with each role he takes. From Lady Bird to Dune, Bones and all to Wonka. With Chalamet, let's just take the last 3-4 years and made some brilliant choices in the movies that he does. But between Wonka and Bob Dylan, these are the two films that will really demonstrate how far his range can go. Because his performance in both films are not just good, more importantly, they're memorable. Chalamet here gives it his all in subtlety and mannerisms. This is going to be one of those roles where it's going to be hard to picture anybody else other than Bob Dylan himself taking this film on. Now, as I kind of mentioned my pet peeves, my flaws earlier, the flaws here, the strategy this film tries to do does have some pacing issues, and at times can feel like there are gaps in the story or there's something missing, especially during the second act, where we have Edward Norton just kind of disappear for an extended amount of time after being a prominent character. And there was a moment where I thought, where did Edward Norton go? There are moments that feel the blanks needed to be filled in, as if I walked out to go to the bathroom and came back and I felt I missed a moment. But right when the movie catches up with itself corrects. A Complete Unknown may not leave a complete emotional impact or a burst of nostalgia like most music biopics try to do, or take you on the emotional roller coaster. It doesn't follow the same exact formula, which is what I loved about this movie. It plays tribute to Dylan by focusing on the artistry and honoring Dylan by taking the viewer not just on a journey of one man, but the journey of one man's art and a journey through people. That in itself makes this another biopic that steps a tad off step from the normal formula, and there are times it works and other times we can see some pacing flaws. But I can appreciate the subtle way it tries to be different solely by honoring the man, by honoring his journey through music events, and more importantly, people. And that's a rarity for a music biopic to do, which is make the journey of the focal point, not the man, making it a journey of an ensemble, not just the individual. I'm giving A Complete Unknown 3 stars.
Oh, the times they are a-changin'.
A former Green Beret and other survivors take refuge inside an elaborate compound when an attack on America leaves the world in chaos in Homestead.
Everyone wondered how the world ended.
We got hit.
Does the sun
America's just been attacked.
go on shining?
But this is the story of how it began.
Los Angeles has been struck by a bomb.
Hold your breath. Hold your breath.
It might be nuclear.
I saw this.
So what?
We never come back.
After today, our lives will never be the same.
We have looting and widespread panic.
Daddy has a place for us to go. We'll be together.
The city's on fire.
There's a guy, been planning for the big one. Called a few months back, needs security people.
What is this place?
Welcome to Homestead. Your guys have to learn how to farm.
We grow our food. We raise our animals. Can you handle yourself with a gun?
This might be the most prepared location in the Rockies. Everyone's gonna want in. And I mean everyone.
My family's out here, and we're starving to death.
I wish we could help, but we can.
You can or you won't.
Our kids need us to be strong.
Please.
People are gonna die at this gate.
They're trespassers. The hills.
They're stealing your grain. They've cut off your solar power.
We need a world where people help strangers, not shoot at them.
Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing and then it all goes wrong.
It's the end of the world.
It's time for you to take full control. It's complicated. Do you think that you're above the law? Do you think that the rules aren't for you?
Is this an ark or is this a fortress?
It's our home.
It's the end of the world.
Now, Homestead was one of those movies I walked into not knowing anything about. And after watching the film and walking out of the theater, then just shrugging my shoulders, I was reviewing the notes to this film, in which I circled the following notes: overacted performances, underwhelming apocalyptic visuals, underwhelming cinematography, and underlined: research the budget to this movie. It seems like a great premise that's brought down by no dangerous visuals, no focus on real chaos, except maybe a grocery store being robbed. Homestead really takes place on a homestead led by Ian Ross, played by Neil McDonough, and his wife Jenna, played by Dawn Oliveri. Homestead's overdone performances should have traded with overdone nuclear chaotic visuals. But as I sat through the credits, it did show a sneak preview to what I thought would be the next film, thinking they must have a lot of confidence in this safe, underdeveloped, and overperformed forgettable film. But as I went home to look at the budget to this film, I discovered the clips I saw were previews to the upcoming TV show. This movie is a setup to a TV show, with the first episode already released that I haven't seen yet, nor do I feel encouraged to seek out immediately. The movie stars Bailey Chase as Jeff Erickson, an ex-Green Beret that joins Ian Ross's homestead with his team of mercenaries to help protect the property during a nuclear crisis. Here they are met with threats from the government, a really nice and polite mob outside the homestead gate that's polite enough not just to knock down the gate and gain access to the property during a nuclear crisis, and a couple of guys that mistakenly make their way onto the homestead property while they're just out on a routine day hunting trip. Sounds like a good idea. The stresses of a nuclear holocaust really encourage these guys to go outside for a casual hunting trip. We also have a character that made a detour to Las Vegas for some fun before arriving to the safe zone of the chaos. Now, even though I said this had underwhelming visuals, I'm usually fine with that if they can convince me that there is a greater conflict through situations, visuals, sounds, etc., whatever it may be. But when we have elements added in from hunting trips, Vegas trips, with nothing else to support real danger other than a government official coming to the property saying he needs inventory of weapons and food or he will raid the homestead, that's not convincing enough. The movie really does what it can to not really give us anything a feeling of conflict or danger. This is a film that sabotages itself to put the audience at ease and especially not encourage that we are going to get anything different by watching the TV show. Because now I saw the plans for what this movie was. It made sense. This just felt like a TV show on the damn big screen. Along with the amateur production value took me out of the experience, alongside with characters that had no depth but rather just dialogue that is supposed to bank solely on the morals of each and every character. The movie banks on having the viewer take our two main characters' contradicting motives between showing humility from Ian Ross and survival of the fittest from Jeff Erickson, and asking the viewer the question of what would we do. But the two had no depth to their reasoning other than surface level dialogue that made me care less to put up any thought into my decision of what I would do. The two characters merely put me in the center of a conflict of two characters, and instead of putting critical thought into it, I merely just wanted mom and dad to stop fighting so I can go on with my day. Our music video director, Ben Smallbone, who has also directed the first episode of the TV show, really shows his flaws on how to build suspense, not only visually, but character-driven suspense. The film feels like just merely a 2-hour movie that knows it's trying to lead to a cliffhanger hook to promote the TV show, and puts little to no effort into the build and banks on the last 10 minutes of the movie. Homestead drags the viewer along on a surface-level PG-themed thriller that lacks in thrills and interest. Between the lazy visuals, no real feeling of threat that the movie seems to bury itself in credibility of, and the characters that seem to compete to overact each other, there's little here of value except a 2-hour trailer of a TV show. The only saving grace is the performance from Neil McDonough, that at least has a likable on-screen presence and tries to make do with the lackluster dialogue. But when he isn't on screen, the movie is just a nuclear bomb of disappointment that wanted me to walk out of the theater and have a drink at my own Homestead. I'm giving Homestead 1.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.
Let the credits roll. We say farewell. Join us next time. We'll have more tales to tell.